Well, good morning, everybody. I wanted to thank you for joining us today on the webinar introducing the brand new PALV Liberty flying car. So we're very excited that you could join us today. There's a lot of people on the webinar. If there are any technology problems, we'll do our best to work with you, but do understand that we'll be recording this webinar for you as well. So welcome to the webinar. I just want to give you an introduction. First of all, here's the star of the show, the PALV Liberty flying car, the world's first commercial flying car. So we're excited to be talking about delivering a PALV flying car to you. I want to start off by just introducing myself. This is Mark Jennings-Bates. I'm the VP of Sales for North America for PALV, and my goal today is to share some very preliminary information with you to help you understand where we're at and how we got here a little bit, and also to talk to you about the options you may have to purchase a PALV. For those of you who are struggling with any technology issues, then we will be recording this for you so that you can take a look a little later at your own leisure. So what we're going to cover today, first of all, we want to talk about the evolution of the PALV and indeed the flying car, which for us relates to the gyroplane industry. We want to talk about why PALV is one of the safest aviation vehicles today. We're going to talk about the specs for the PALV a little bit, and that actually is on our website. You could go to www.pal-v.com, and if you scroll down to the bottom, you will get all of the specs for the PALV. So we're going to share that with you a little bit as well, even though you can get that a little later. And then we're going to answer some questions that a lot of people have been asking me about the approval process. How is it that we can be confident that we can deliver a car to the marketplace in North America? And then finally, we're going to talk about how you can reserve one of the first flying cars in North America. Pretty exciting stuff. So why am I here? Well, I do have a little bit of experience. This actually was my first attempt to fly a flying car. It was my rally car, and this is probably several years ago now, but this was the result of flying over a cliff backwards at about 110 kilometers an hour, so you can see some of the damage to the rear of the car. I know that your experience is going to be very different to mine, obviously. This was prior to looking more seriously at the aviation industry, but it was a thrilling experience, no doubt. And hopefully we can turn that into a productive experience for the future. But yeah, that's one of the reasons that I'm here. I actually have set a Guinness World Record, or led a team on a Guinness World Record with Paramotors as well, flying around Australia. So a little bit of background in aviation, and excited to be here working with PALV. Interestingly enough, I'm just in the process of moving house as well, and in packing up everything, one of the things I did find is this 1951 copy of Popular Mechanics magazine. I have no clue why this is in my possession. I don't know where it came from, but the interesting thing is it is here, and it's ironic that now I'm working with PALV and talking to you about flying cars, because obviously, as you can see here, back in 1951, we were hoping that one day we'd be able to park that little helicopter in the garage and make the transportation revolution happen earlier than it really did. So very, very excited to be here. Of course, we've been innovating since that point in time, and you will have seen a lot of media very recently about flying cars. Some of it that is a little bit confusing, I find, because it doesn't relate to a flying car at all. If it's a trampoline with some floats and a couple of rotor blades underneath the trampoline, I'm not entirely sure how that qualifies as being a flying car, but the media is picking up on anything that anybody says is a flying car and starting to report it. The important thing for me is that we actually start to analyze what is practical, and I think the exciting thing about PALV in Holland is they didn't innovate beyond the legal spectrum. They looked at what they could do today to deliver a flying car, and so within today's current regulatory framework, they're actually able to be confident they can deliver you a flying car, whereas almost every single competitor we have in the marketplace, and there aren't very many of them actually, there appears to be a lot of them, but there really aren't very many competitors. Most of them are innovating so far beyond what is legal and usable and practical for today that it's going to take many, many years to deliver. So we're excited to say that we anticipate being the very first commercial flying car manufacturer in the marketplace, and that won't be very long away at all. So with that done, what I want to do is to just move ahead to a slightly different part of the program. And as I say, I do want to take this or get this done in about 45 minutes. What I would like to do is just simply talk, and then you're going to see a screen come up with, again, see a picture of the PALV Liberty and the Golden Gate Bridge, of course, in San Francisco, a very iconic bridge that marks a lot of the starting points of many aviation endeavors in the past. So exciting for us to be able to reference that in one of the images. So we're going to go through this in some detail. I would happily answer questions if you put them in the chat box. And if I don't get a chance to answer them during the actual webinar, I've got emails from you and I can certainly get back to you. You can also email me directly, mark.jennings-bates@pal-v.com. Send me your questions and I will get back to you with an answer as quickly as I can. Okay, so here we are. We're in the really the future of mobility, as the slide says. I want to welcome all of you to the webinar today. And you've got a little bit of an introduction as to me and my background now. And we've talked about the goals, what we want to deliver to you in terms of content. So welcome to the PALV webinar. And it's a joy to be here. It certainly is an aircraft that will be a joy to fly and a car that will be a joy to drive. And I want to talk about why that is, perhaps. Currently, there's really only one potential product that offers a somewhat similar experience in the marketplace. We really don't have too many competitors, and there's one that we believe is producing something that may be viable, yet to be proven, but may be viable. However, as I mentioned, one of the most recent flying car launches ended up being a flying trampoline that you can fly over a lake only, and is referenced as a flying car by the media. So I think the important thing to understand is that if we take a look at what's being launched, really think about, is it truly a flying car, or is it doing something else for us? And I know a lot of what we're seeing is drone type of contraptions, often unpiloted drones. And I think if you just read the media about the consternation over just very small drones that individuals are flying remotely, and listen to the dialogue and the narrative around how people are very uncomfortable with that, and then put yourself in the position of being a regulator and looking at a drone that can take multiple passengers and fly over cities. It's not a very comfortable thing, and practically it won't happen for a very long time in actual fact. So PALV is the solution. Now, when we talk about the solution, of course, what we need to understand is that anytime we design a flying car, it's naturally a compromise. We have a compromised car and we have a compromised aircraft. And so somebody will have a better car than we produce, and somebody will have a better aircraft that we produce. But when you put the two together, I think it's a very safe and practical solution for very many travelers. Some of the things that it can do, I mean, I really truly believe that you're going to find the PALV offers a very spirited driving experience. Not going to have the same performance as a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or a McLaren, but it's going to have that sporty feel to it. It's going to be a spirited drive, if you like, aided by the tilting cab technology that we've incorporated into the vehicle. And of course, it's going to be a joy to fly. It's a beautiful aircraft. It's a very safe aircraft, and you're going to feel comfortable flying it. But the practical solutions may be used to overcome traffic. We might find that we can get to our cottage a little easily. We can certainly access remote areas. And it's the only vehicle today that can guarantee your arrival at the destination, because, of course, we can always stop flying and start driving. And it gives us the opportunity, because of that, to enjoy the experience with less worry than we typically would have when we travel. So the truth is, and in fact, our chief flying instructor at the school in the US, Michael Burton, is talking a lot about putting the fun back in flying. You know, sometimes we get so wrapped up in the technicalities of flying that it no longer becomes fun. And one thing a gyroplane does for you is that it allows you to really enjoy the flying. And so here you can see a pilot coming into land on a grass strip and somebody else driving on a country road and really enjoying the use of their PALV. And that's what we expect our owners to be able to do. It's really an extension of a typical flying experience. So a lot of people we talk to are very accomplished rotary wing pilots or very seasoned fixed wings pilots. And they're just talking about the fact that they really want to get back to the roots of flying and really enjoy flying something like a PALV. So it's putting the fun back in flying, which I really think is a great concept. You can enjoy the drive and you can enjoy the flight, and you can combine the two for a unique and very novel experience. So if we talk about who the PALV is designed for, it's mostly people who value their time, frankly. I mean, some people will very simply look at the PALV for fun, but many people practically are going to look at it as a time saver. And the benefits certainly can't be overstated. One of the few areas that we need to take in mind is the fact that we no longer need to arrange for transportation to or from the airport. And in fact, we don't even need a hangar storage at the airport. So we can drive our aircraft to the airport now. And when I talk about driving, this is not a compromised drive in terms of speed and performance, we'll be able to drive at the speed limit to the airport, and then we'll be able to enter the airside of the airport and contact the tower and arrange to depart on our journey. So it certainly provides a bundle of benefits that to the busy entrepreneur, business person, or socialite, they will see the practical value in saving some time, avoiding traffic jams, those kinds of things. And I think from a benefit point of view, you can certainly see that you could be more productive because, frankly, you're going to be less tired when you arrive at your meetings. And many of us have had those days where we're stuck in airport lounges and flights are delayed or cancelled, and then we have to have another night in a hotel. The PALV is a vehicle that can hopefully help you avoid that. We're going to develop extra time in our schedule, which, of course, all of us would be able to use beneficially, whether it be for business or for family or friendships. We can invest more time in other areas of our life. And then finally, we can be more relaxed because of the stress of flight cancellations and weather delays. That disappears, and we know that we can find our way underneath weather, or we can put down on the road, or we can find our way around weather, and we can get to our destination, and we're in control of that, which I think is very exciting. Now, the slide here talks about the fact that the PALV has been engineered to beat the weather, and that certainly is the case. I think many pilots have got stories of being stranded at an airstrip due to bad weather. The PALV, that won't happen to you, frankly, because you can drive to the next airfield and drive around the weather, and you can take off when you get to that point. So that has been misconstrued a little bit in the media. So I have seen some media reports that talk about the fact that the PALV can fly in any weather. Well, just like any aircraft, that is not the case, actually, but it can travel through any weather. So we can fly, and when we see weather that is outside of our normal flight envelope, then we can put down and we can carry on driving. So what you will find with the PALV, because of its gyroplane configuration, is that the crosswind performance is very, very good. Most pilots are very uncomfortable in crosswinds in a fixed-wing aircraft. Gyroplane, it takes little time to condition a pilot to taking off and landing in crosswinds, which is a huge added bonus for us. They manage turbulence very differently, and partly because we've got a rotor disc that provides stability. So just like a spinning bike wheel, if you go back to school years ago, we spun a bike wheel and tried to tilt it. We've got a gyroscopic effect with the rotor disc, and so it doesn't like to come out of the plane that it's flying in. And so at the end of the day, what you'll realize is that in turbulence, we've got two things. We've got this gyroscopic effect, and we've also got a very fast wing. So we really cut through the turbulence rather than get pushed around by it. So you'll probably see a comparable fixed wing compared to something like the PALV. You'll see probably a 60% reduction perhaps in turbulence in the cockpit of the PALV, which is fantastic. Mountain weather, again, because of that, we can handle turbulence in mountains very easily. But one thing you may not be aware of is the PALV now has twin engines. And so we've got increased performance from the horsepower that we can provide, and that is a very secure feeling for any pilot. And then finally, of course, we have the option to land and continue our journey driving. So we really have looked at the vehicle from a safety perspective and been able to create a vehicle that is extremely safe to fly, which gives us security and comfort. Off-road gets a new meaning. Of course, we don't mean driving off-road, but you can fly the PALV to those remote destinations that ordinarily might be a very long drive or a boat ride or a ferry ride or a flight, all of which can get cancelled, and then that means that the second home is used less and becomes a challenge for you. For me on the West Coast, that's certainly the case. The Pacific Northwest, we've got a lot of ferry and air taxi services that often get cancelled due to weather. And so if you want to remove stress from your life or reduce the cost of traveling to your cottage, then the PALV is one vehicle that can actually do that. And we certainly have plenty of clients talking to us about that. Access over water becomes easier, and access to those remote areas becomes a little bit easier. And certainly if you live in the mountains the way I do, travel times can be vastly reduced. So very typically the road networks are oriented around valleys with passes into the next valley, which means typically you're traversing north and south and going over a pass, and you have to stay on one side of a lake until you get to the bottom of a lake, and then you go over another pass and go north again. It's very complex and very long journeys in the mountains compared to the distance you travel as the crow flies, which of course we can do with the PALV. So yeah, very, very exciting in terms of the areas that you can get access to. It goes without saying, I think, that once you become the owner of a PALV, there's a little bit of head-turning effect that will happen, a little bit of notoriety, and your friends will be very happy to share the experience with you. I'm sure your family, friends, and clients, they'll be excited to have the opportunity to experience the thrill of flying in a PALV and landing at or driving to their destination without the hassle of security, flight delays, weather delays, and check-in lines. So from a practical aspect, it's a useful vehicle. From a fun aspect, you can certainly show your friends that you've got a very innovative and new vehicle that we totally believe will be part of a transportation revolution over the next few years, and very excited to offer that opportunity to you. We can see here PALV looks comfortable, parked in probably some southern European harbour here, and one of the challenges that we're hearing about is helicopter owners on super yachts who are finding it difficult to actually, or logistically challenging, to get a helicopter off a super yacht. And what that typically requires is the super yacht needs to be started up and moved out into open water before the helicopter can actually take off. That's a challenge logistically, and it means that you're burning a lot of fuel. Either that boat has to sit out there while the owner in the helicopter does his meetings or whatever the case may be, or the boat has to come back into the harbour and dock and then go out again to meet the owner somewhere in the open water. That's a challenge, and conversely, what the PALV can do is you can very easily crane the PALV off the boat onto the dock and drive to the airport, which again is a remarkable solution for super yacht owners. So really what I want to talk about is the fact that fun does not come at a cost with the PALV. So the cost in this instance is learning to fly. So there were two guiding principles that our engineering department had as they designed the PALV. One of those was really the fact that we wanted to have a vehicle that was very, very safe to fly. The use of the gyroplane platform allows us to do that, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the seminar here, the webinar. The other is that we wanted to make it simple to fly, to have you learn to fly, and I think the anxiety of learning to fly prevents so many people from experiencing the freedom and the thrill of three-dimensional travel that an airplane can offer. And so with the PALV, and I'll honestly tell you, when you go to our school, one of our schools around the world, you'll see nothing but smiles as people step out of a gyroplane that is the platform that we'll train in. You'll see so many smiles as people get out after their first flight and just go, well, I had no clue flying in a gyroplane was like that. It's a very comfortable experience. So let's talk a little bit about why that is. Typically with a fixed wing environment, you're going to find that you probably won't be soloing the fixed wing aircraft until you've got 13, 15, maybe 20 hours under your belt of flying experience. With a PALV, many instructors will tell you that they're getting students who are soloing 5 or 6 hours, 5 to 8 hours perhaps into their training. They're feeling comfortable enough and they're showing the adaptation of skills enough that the CFI will let them solo. That's because the gyroplane system is very simple to understand and very easy to fly. So I think the engineering heads and staff and the team at PALV have done an excellent job in creating a vehicle that is going to be simple to learn to fly. The other important aspect is the safety aspect. And so we've done that with a few different design principles. Firstly, we've got twin engines, and you'll be using one for driving. You'll be using both for flying. But what it does mean when we're flying is we have catastrophic failure. If we have catastrophic failure on one engine, we still have a second engine that can continue to aid us in flying. Now, when we lose all power on one engine, we are down to 100 horsepower, and the PALV is quite a heavy vehicle because it's a car as well. And so you won't be maintaining flight, and that's pretty typical with a fixed wing aircraft with twin engines as well. Often there are aspects of flying on one engine that are a little bit challenging, but they do increase the safety. They give us lots of opportunity to look around us for a safe landing spot so that we can land, continue to drive to our destination, or get the aviation vehicle serviced if that is important and necessary. So it's a very, very important facet. It also gives us that increased horsepower, which in mountain weather or difficult winds can be very advantageous to us. The second big aspect is that the gyroplane is continually in auto rotation. So if something happens to both of our engines, which is extremely unlikely, then you will still be able to continue to fly and control the PALV. And you can fly it just the way you would a fixed wing. You have a glide ratio that you'll be able to use and calculate where you can land, and you'll be able to do that. Otherwise, you can come vertically down, completely in control of that aircraft, and you'll be able to do a relatively safe landing just coming down vertically and using your training to be able to land that vehicle at the end of that vertical descent is very important. But it's very simple compared to a helicopter where we need to disengage the engine and the gearbox. We need to change the pitch on the rotor head. Several things that we need to do. We need to point it at the ground fairly steeply so that we can build up inertia and energy into the rotor disc. That energy is always in the PALV rotor disc, and that's so important. So when something goes wrong, you don't need to worry about that. It will still fly. And frankly, all of the landings that I've done virtually are what we call dead stick landings. There's no power. You just come into land, and it's a very comfortable experience. So that's important. Then the gyroplane principles that we've talked about, the fact that it's easy to learn to fly, that in heavy winds it's a comfortable aircraft to fly in, and you're going to get reduced performance heading upwind, of course, but it's an easy aircraft to learn to fly, and it's very quick in terms of the learning curve for any pilot to figure it out. And then finally on the road, of course, we have a tilting cab, and that's because whenever we design an aircraft, we need a tall undercarriage, and that gives us a high center of gravity, which is dangerous in a vehicle. So knowing that we have a wing system on top of the vehicle, then we've introduced two things. We've got a lowering suspension, which you can see in this photograph on the right, and we've also got a tilting cab, and we use about 15 degrees of tilt now, so it's not radical, but again, it'll help it feel like a sporty drive and provides us the safety and security that we want to be pilots and drivers of that vehicle. So, addictive flying and comfort. Again, I referenced the number 60% earlier here. PALV is saying that 80% less affected by turbulence and self-stabilizing in wind gusts. And again, that's that gyroscopic effect of the rotor disc that can really help you. You're going to find that your passengers are very comfortable in the PALV. There's lots of good solid vision from the cockpit, and it's a very comfortable cockpit, so you can really enjoy flying to your destination. And it's safe to say that where most fixed-wing aircraft would perhaps be grounded or stay on the ground, the PALV can still take to the skies thanks to this free-rotating rotary wing that's always in auto-rotation. So one of the questions that we do get is, do I need a license? And yes, you certainly do. And I know, again, we're seeing lots of talk about autonomous drones or air taxi services that won't have a pilot. And frankly, that's not likely to happen in my lifetime and probably not in your lifetime. It's a bit of a pipe dream. But what will happen is we will have flying cars that do require a flying license, so that not only does the vehicle conform with today's regulations, but the operator of the vehicle conforms with today's regulations. And I think that's only practical and functional for us to undertake what we are referring to as a transportation revolution. Then we need to do that cautiously within today's regulations. I'm very excited to let you know that PALV is doing that. So yes, you'll need a gyroplane license. That's going to take you about 40 to 45 hours in North America to get that license, depending on how well you take on the knowledge that you're being taught, and then you will be ready to fly the PALV, which is exciting. So here you can see the flight mode on the right-hand side, and you can see the driver mode on the left-hand side with the tilting cab, and that's that's not quite 15 degrees, but that's pretty close to 15 degrees. So it really is a fun vehicle to drive and to fly. It gives you a sports car feeling, and it's very maneuverable in the air. One of the things that you'll find fixed-wing pilots don't like in the mountains is getting into a box canyon where they can't turn around. The exciting thing with a gyroplane, because you have a rotary wing on top and because you have power behind, is you can literally turn the cab around under the rotor disc and turn straight out. So you need no more than the rotor disc to fit into that space, and you can turn around. That's pretty tight. And a fixed-wing pilot would feel very comfortable knowing that they could do that. So very exciting. And one important aspect here is the PALV has been designed for urban environments. So not only is it a good practical vehicle for somebody who lives in the country, but this is a good vehicle for an urban city person. And I think if you look at a lot of the designs, which they're simply cartoons and prototypes at the moment, what we're seeing is vehicles that are extraordinarily long or extraordinarily tall or extraordinarily wide, and with a long wheelbase. And so that's going to be very difficult to turn inside a parkade like this, let alone park in one of those spots. You'll need more than one of those spots. The PALV has been designed just pretty much the same size as a regular sedan, a regular automobile, and you're going to be able to not only drive that in the car park because of the height of the PALV, but you'll be able to navigate around the car park because of the wheelbase, and that's very important. So very, very exciting to literally know that we can park anywhere and we can drive anywhere, and we're not going to be stressed about whether we can park at the end of the day when we get there. So here is that PALV Liberty, beautiful, distinctive Italian styling, a gorgeous vehicle on the road, and of course a gorgeous vehicle in the air. I mean, look at that. Who wouldn't be excited and proud to be able to drive a vehicle that looks like that? I certainly know that I'm excited to be driving one of those in the future. It's super. So let me talk quickly about two things. We're going to talk about specifications. So one of the things that you can do, as I mentioned, and let's do it just now, is you can go to the PALV website, which is pal-v.com. I'm going to go onto that website and you'll see exactly where I go to find the specifications. So we're going to scroll down to the bottom of the page. And there we go. So we've got specifications here, and it says view specs. Let's open that, and you're going to be able to see exactly what we're predicting the specs for the PALV are. So max speed 160 kilometers an hour. That's a little less than 100 knots. And top speed acceleration 0 to 60 miles an hour, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 9 seconds. Engine horsepower and drive mode is 100 horsepower. And fuel economy 7.6 liters per 100 kilometers. So a very fuel efficient vehicle that can take us a total of 1,300 kilometers, which is fantastic, 1315. In flight mode, we've got an economic cruise speed of 140 kilometers an hour. We've got a high cruise speed, which is 160 kilometers an hour, about 100 miles an hour. And then we've got a maximum speed, which is about 100 knots, so 180 kilometers an hour. Minimum speed for level flight is 50 kilometers an hour. That means if you've got a 20 kilometer an hour headwind, 30 kilometers an hour, and you'll be in level flight. Engine power at flight is 200 horsepower with a maximum operating altitude of 3,500 meters. Roughly, that's about 12 or 13,000 feet, and a useful load of 246 kilograms. Takeoff roll, typically 180 meters without wind. If we've got a headwind, that's going to get reduced. And takeoff distance, of course, for clearance over obstacles, about 330 meters, again, dependent on the headwind. Landing roll distance, 30 meters, so you'll see good pilots with gyroplanes literally be able to land sideways on the runway, so very, very exciting. Fuel economy, 26 liters per hour consumption. That gives us a maximum range with a half-hour reserve of 400 kilometers. And if we need to get into that half-hour reserve because of problems, we've got a 500-kilometer range. That's a maximum endurance of 4.3 hours, plenty of time to fly between a cup of coffee, which is very exciting indeed. Capacity is 2 persons, mass empty weight 664 kilos, max takeoff weight 910 kilos. And you'll be able to drive to the gas station, the petrol station, and fill up with gas from the petrol station rather than going to the flight service people, which is super. Baggage load typically with the average person in there is going to be about 20 kilos. And that's enough for a weekend bag for most people. So those are the specs. Very exciting. I'm going to talk finally about how the approval process is going to work, because we're getting many questions about that in North America, largely because we're compared to the gyroplane industry that's been, you know what, without being rude to gyroplane pilots, the industry's been a little bit agricultural, and we've seen a lot of home-built gyroplanes, and literally we still see that today. Only recently in the US has that changed, and we've started to see some certified gyroplanes coming into the market. And in Canada, we've had that for a little while now. But the PALV will not be an experimental aircraft. It will not be a home-built. It will not be serviced by you personally. It will be a fully certified aircraft. And I know a gyroplane pilot's probably rolling his eyes now and going, well, that'll never happen. Well, that's only because nobody's actually introduced a gyroplane under the FAR 27 that the FAA has for rotary winged aircraft. So that's what will happen. We've been working closely with EASA in Europe, and the first approvals will come from EASA. The vehicle has been completely designed within the regulations, and that's why we have confidence. There's a set of guiding criteria and regulations that you must design to in order to get approval. And so we have a high level of confidence that our vehicle has been designed within those criteria, and so it's very difficult for anyone to disapprove the certification. Now, that doesn't mean it's guaranteed, because we're dealing with a government regulatory agency. There's delays that can occur, but so far so good. We're very excited to share with you that we expect in 2018 we'll be delivering to the US and to Europe, and in 2020 we'll be delivering a different model, a PALV Sport, which is a slightly different specification. Same aircraft, looks the same, flies the same, but has a different specification. And again, the reason is that the confidence comes from the fact that we designed within the regulations. There are no exemptions that we need. There are no modifications. We can take this to the regulators and be confident that they can look at it and say, well, you've hit all of the checks in the boxes, so congratulations. Now, what I didn't realize, and you will have seen the PALV 1, the first prototype. It actually looks different to this, but it went through flight trials. I did not realize that the function of the PALV 1 until I joined PALV. The function of the PALV 1 is to certify the components. So when you build a prototype aircraft, one of the roles is to certify each of the individual components so that then you can redesign and you can use the certified components that you incorporated into the first prototype. So it's an expensive business to get into, and it allows us to now know with confidence we have a vehicle that has certified components that we know will work. PALV has a very sophisticated simulator that allows us to look at all of the physics and the engineering and check every single thing that changes, every component that changes on the PALV can be run through the simulator. And we have a team of almost 50 engineers who are working on this to completion. So very, very exciting. And that's why we have a confidence that not only will we get the EASA approval, but once we have that, we'll be able to come to North America, to the FAA, and talk to them. Now, there was a question that I just saw in the chat box, and that's in relation to the driving side of things. Does it qualify for driving? And yes, it does. And that's because it's a three-wheeled vehicle. Where some of our competitors are designing four-wheel vehicles, the fourth wheel is incredibly expensive because it puts your vehicle into the four-wheel category of regulations, which means you have to go through crash testing. A three-wheel vehicle is designed quite differently and has a different set of criteria and regulations that the transportation departments will use. So Canada and the US are quite used to looking at three-wheel vehicles, and they have no problem taking a look at the PALV and saying, yes, it does look as though it fits into the three-wheel design criteria. So we're very confident. Our insurance company, who's going to be providing insurance for our clients, are very confident, and we really look forward to you being one of the first owners of the PALV. So there are three ways that you can actually participate with us in terms of purchasing or pre-purchasing a PALV. The first is to buy one of only 25 units that are being delivered to North America in 2018, 2019. That's the PALV Liberty Pioneer, a limited edition model, very, very beautifully and finely handcrafted with luxury leather Italian leather interiors, fully spec'd, beautiful, very noticeable trim on the outside that will separate it from what will ultimately be the production model. For that, you can actually purchase an option to purchase, which is non-refundable, $25,000, and that will include membership of the PALV Owners Club and also 10 hours of flight training with one of our schools. And for anybody who's a fixed-wing pilot or a rotary-wing pilot, that's pretty close to what you'd need to be able to add the gyroplane endorsement to your current flying certificate. And for anybody else, you'll need to pay for a little bit more flying hours to get the final license that you'll need to fly the PALV. But that's one of the advantages. Now, if that's not the vehicle that you want, that's $599,000. Then the PALV Sport, our production model, is anticipated to be released at $399,000. And that's available as an option to purchase for $10,000. So what happens with the option to purchases is you'll get a fixed delivery position in the system. So when we deliver the first car, it will go to the person who has option number 1, and then sequentially through to option number 25 on the limited edition model, and on the PALV Sport option number 50, I believe it is. So you'll be able to secure your spot and know that you're next in line for delivery potentially. They are fully assignable agreements, so if you do, it will need the approval of PALV, but that won't be unreasonably withheld. And so if you do decide that at the end of the day it maybe not be the vehicle for you, or your financial circumstances have changed, you may have the option to sell that and potentially for a profit perhaps too, to somebody who's waiting to get a PALV and is further back in the line. So all exciting stuff. Now, at the end of the day, if you're a little undecided after you've seen all of this information, you're not sure which option you want, then one of the things that you can do is you can actually you can reserve with an escrow deposit, which is a refundable deposit. For $2,500, you can reserve a PALV Sport. Now, what happens in that system is you'll go behind the option to purchase holders who have numbers 1 to 50 in the US marketplace. And don't quote me on the 50. I'm not sure what that number is. I think it's 50 that we're going to in the North American marketplace. And you will go behind them. You'll get a reservation system that starts after the last option to purchase holder has been delivered their aircraft. And if we happen to pre-sell more than 50, we will be coming back to the option to purchase holders and giving the option to convert to an option to purchase, at which point you will be required to pay the balance of your deposit and release the escrow into a non-refundable deposit, or then you can just stay in an escrow deposit, but you'll get pushed back with another release of potentially perhaps 25 PALV Sports. So if you're interested in talking to me about that, you can by all means send me an email, mark.jennings-bates pal.v.com, and I'll gladly respond to that as quickly as I can. I hope it's been useful for you. It's a pleasure to see so many people on the webinar here, and please feel free to continue to put questions in the chat box, and I will make sure that at the end of the day I get around to sending you the answers you were looking for if I didn't get them to you initially. Okay, thanks so much. It was a pleasure to share with you.